Yarden Preston was already regretting his life choices when his 5-year-old daughter, Lily, spilled orange juice all over his last decent button-down shirt. "Daddy, you said we were going to a concert," she cried, bouncing in her tutu skirt and sparkly sneakers as he scrubbed at the stain. "We are, baby," Yarden said, forcing a smile as he tossed the shirt into the laundry pile and reached for a wrinkled gray tee he'd worn to paint his friend's porch last Sunday. "But we're gonna be fashionably late, okay?" He didn't mention that the tickets had been a gift from his buddy at work, who bailed last minute after his girlfriend dumped him. Yarden had planned to sell the extra ticket online for a quick $80, but something stopped him. Maybe it was the way Lily lit up at the mention of real music and lights. Half an hour later, they were finally finding their seats at the outdoor amphitheater, the summer air buzzing with energy and overpriced beer fumes. Yarden lifted Lily onto the seat next to him and handed her a bag of popcorn that cost more than lunch. "You excited?" he asked. She nodded too fast. "Is the singer pretty?" "I think she's a dude, sweetheart." "Oh," she looked mildly disappointed. Just then, a woman walked down the aisle, looking completely out of place in this crowd of tank tops and band tees. She wore dark jeans, a crisp white blouse, and heels that didn't belong on grass. Her long dark hair was pulled into a sleek ponytail, and she looked like she'd stepped out of a boardroom, not into a mosh pit. She paused near them, glancing down at her phone, then the empty seat. Yarden stood up. "Hey, if you're looking for a seat, I've got a spare." She hesitated. "You sure it's okay?" "Yeah, my buddy ditched me. Long story. You'd be saving me from talking to myself for 2 hours." She let out a soft laugh and took the seat, looking over at Lily. "Hi there." Lily grinned. "You don't look like a rock star either." The woman laughed. "I'll take that as a compliment." "I'm Yarden," he said, offering his hand. "And this is Lily." "Geneva," she replied, shaking his hand. Her fingers were delicate, but her grip was firm. "Nice to meet you both." The concert started with a sudden burst of lights and bass, and Lily shrieked with delight. Yarden glanced over to find Geneva clapping along, her eyes bright like she hadn't been expecting to enjoy this. She leaned in halfway through the second song. "This is actually amazing." He chuckled. "Told you. You just needed popcorn and an enthusiastic 5-year-old to get the full experience." By the fourth song, Lily had fallen asleep with her head on Yarden's lap. Geneva reached over and gently adjusted the hoodie tucked under Lily's head. "You're a good dad," she said quietly. He looked down at his daughter, then back at Geneva. "I try, it's just the two of us." "What about her mom?" she asked. "She left when Lily was 2, said she wasn't cut out for diapers and cartoons." He paused. "I guess she was honest." Geneva's face softened, but she didn't pity him. "That's brutal." "Yeah, but we've got each other. She's a handful, but she's my world." They sat in silence for a few beats, the music washing over them. Geneva's eyes stayed on the stage, but something in her expression had shifted. After the encore, the crowd started to thin. Geneva stood and stretched, then looked at Yarden. "Thank you for the seat, and the company." He gave her a sheepish look. "Can I ask what you were doing here alone?" She shrugged. "Sometimes I just need to feel. Normal music helps." "Fair enough," he hesitated. "Want to grab a hot dog or something? I mean, if you've got time." She looked surprised. "You're asking me out?" Yarden laughed. "No, well, yes, maybe. Just figured you might need something to balance all that. Normal." She smiled. "All right, one hot dog, but I'm buying." Yarden raised an eyebrow. "You sure? I've got exactly $7 and a coupon for free fries." Geneva laughed, the sound open and real. "Then I definitely insist." They walked to a food truck, Lily still asleep in Yarden's arms. Geneva handed the vendor a card so black it looked like it could buy the entire truck. Yarden blinked. That's a fancy piece of plastic. Company card, she said casually. He didn't press her, but when she ordered a hot dog with truffle aioli and asked about imported mustard, he narrowed his eyes. You've done this before. I have no idea what you're talking about, she teased. They sat at a small picnic table under string lights. Geneva took small bites while Yarden carefully ate one-handed with Lily's head still against his chest. So what do you do? He asked between bites. Geneva paused. Consulting, strategy, boring stuff. He tilted his head. You're being vague. Maybe I like being mysterious. Maybe you're hiding something. She smiled like she was daring him to guess. Maybe. He leaned back. Well, if you're a spy, you're doing a terrible job blending in. She laughed again, and he liked the way her face lit up when she was relaxed. Less polished, more real. After a while, she glanced at her watch. Should go. He nodded, suddenly not wanting the night to end. Yeah, of course. She stood, brushing invisible crumbs from her jeans. Thank you for the ticket and the hot dog. I thought you paid. Still, it was a good night. She hesitated, then reached into her bag and pulled out a business card. She handed it to him. If you ever want to grab another concert or some fries, call me. Yarden looked down at the card. Geneva Zanders, Chief Executive Officer, Zanders Innovations. His eyebrows shot up. You're a CEO. She winked, surprise. And with that, she turned and walked off into the night, heels clicking against the pavement, leaving Yarden standing there, stunned, holding his sleeping daughter and the card of a woman who had just completely changed his night and maybe something more. Yarden stood in the cramped kitchen of his apartment 2 days later, trying to coax a stubborn toaster into releasing the last slice of bread before it turned into charcoal. The smell of burnt crust filled the air just as Lily came bounding in, her curls wild and her backpack slung over one shoulder. You forgot to pack my juice box again, she said, climbing onto one of the mismatched chairs at the table. I ran out, Yarden answered, prying the toast free with a butter knife. But I packed extra strawberries to make up for it. She wrinkled her nose. Strawberries don't go with turkey. Sure they do, if you pretend hard enough. He handed her the sandwich and glanced at the clock. We've got 10 minutes before the bus. Lily bit into her food and chewed thoughtfully. Are we seeing the lady again? What lady? The one with the shiny shoes. Yarden raised an eyebrow. You mean Geneva? Lily nodded. She was nice. She smelled like fancy shampoo. He laughed. I don't know if we'll see her again. But he had the card. And the card had a number. And despite every reasonable instinct yelling at him to forget it, he hadn't thrown it away. After Lily hopped on the school bus, he sat on the stoop with a cup of instant coffee and stared at the card again. It felt like a dare. He wasn't the kind of guy who called women like her. He worked long days at a construction site, came home with calloused hands, and spent his nights figuring out which bill could wait one more week. She probably had 4 assistants and a driver who made more in a month than he did in a year. Still, he dialed the number. And when a voice answered on the second ring, he nearly dropped the phone. Geneva Zanders. Hey, hi, it's Yarden from the concert. There was the briefest pause, then, oh, I was hoping you'd call. He blinked. You were. I don't give my card to just anyone who offers me a spare seat and cold fries. He chuckled, nerves easing slightly. Well, I'm honored. Do you have plans this evening? Yarden hesitated. Depends, does laundry count? Cancel it, I want to buy you dinner. He blinked. Wait, you mean like? Like a date, Yarden, you're free, right? He looked down at his chipped work boots and stained jeans. I guess I could make time. I'll send a car, 6 o'clock. She hung up before he could protest. At 5:45, he was still pacing in front of his closet, which consisted mostly of clothes that had been washed too many times or not enough. He settled on a navy blue button-down that didn't have any visible holes and a pair of black slacks he'd worn to a wedding 2 years ago. He dropped Lily off at his neighbor's with her favorite blanket and a solemn promise that he'd be back before bedtime. When the sleek black sedan pulled up outside, the driver opened the door like Yarden was someone important. He slid into the back seat, heart racing. The car took him downtown, past places he'd only ever seen on TV or in glossy magazines. It stopped in front of a tall glass building with a rooftop restaurant glowing gold against the night sky. He stepped out and stared up at it. Geneva was waiting in the lobby. Her hair was loose this time, softer around her face, and she wore a navy dress that looked like it cost more than his rent. But it wasn't the dress that caught him, it was the way she looked at him, like she was genuinely glad he'd come. "You clean up well," she said. "You look like you own the building." She arched one brow. "I do." He stared at her. "I'm kidding," she said, "mostly." They took a private elevator to the top floor, where the restaurant opened out into a rooftop terrace strung with warm lights and filled with soft jazz. A hostess led them to a table at the edge, overlooking the city. The view stole his breath. A waiter appeared with a bottle of wine before they even ordered. Geneva glanced at Yarden. "Do you drink?" He shrugged. "Sometimes, not when I'm babysitting." She smiled. "Good answer." They ordered her with ease, him with confusion over half the menu, and the conversation flowed with surprising comfort. "So," she said after a while, "what do you really do when you're not saving women from lonely concerts?" "I work construction," he said. "Residential mostly. Roofing, drywall, whatever pays." She studied him. "You like it?" "I like building something from nothing," he said, "but I'd like it more if I didn't have to chase down paychecks." He didn't expect her to understand, but she didn't look uncomfortable. "Ever think about switching careers?" "I've got a kid who likes name brand cereal. Can't afford to start over." Geneva tapped her glass. "You're resourceful, that counts for something." He tilted his head. "You always like to fix people." "I don't fix people, I hire them or invest in them." "Is that what this is, an investment?" She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "No, this is dinner." Their food arrived, a blur of colors and shapes he barely recognized, but tasted better than anything he'd eaten in years. Geneva asked about Lily, about his day-to-day life, and listened without judgment. When he asked about her work, she answered carefully, never too much, never bragging, but with the quiet confidence of someone who'd built something no one thought she could. Halfway through dessert, she leaned forward. "You know, I don't usually do this." "Do what?" "Go out with people who wear steel toe boots and call me out on my mustard choices." He laughed. "Guess I'm special." "You are," she said, voice soft. That word hung between them like a challenge. After dinner, she walked him back to the car. The city buzzed around them, but for a moment, it was just the two of them on the curb, the air warm and electric. "I had a good time," he said. "So did I." He hesitated. "You gonna disappear now?" "Do I seem like the disappearing type?" "Honestly, I haven't figured you out yet." She stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then keep trying." She kissed him, then a quick, certain kiss that left him stunned. Standing on a sidewalk he had no business feeling this lucky on. When the car pulled away, Yarden leaned back and closed his eyes. Somehow, against all odds, his life had just taken a turn he never saw coming. Yarden didn't see Geneva for almost a week after their rooftop dinner. Not because she vanished, she texted once to say she had to fly to Chicago for a board meeting, but because he couldn't stop overthinking every moment they'd shared. He replayed the kiss too many times, questioned whether she'd been serious about wanting to see him again, and tried not to let the silence in between feel like rejection. Meanwhile, life didn't pause. Lily came home with glitter in her hair and a story about a boy who tried to trade her pudding for her crayons. Yarden worked 3 double shifts in a row, hauling lumber and fixing drywall in a half-finished mansion that looked like Geneva probably owned the blueprint. He found himself wondering things he never used to like, whether she liked thunderstorms or what she looked like when she wasn't wearing a $1,000 dress. It was Thursday evening when his phone rang, and her name lit up the screen. "I have an idea," Geneva said before he could speak. "Hi to you too. I'm serious, are you free tomorrow?" He wiped plastered dust from his hands. "Depends what kind of idea we're talking about." "I want you to come with me to the Xander's Foundation gala." Yarden leaned against the counter. "That sounds like a black tie thing." "It is." "I don't own a tie, or a suit, or shoes that don't squeak on polished floors." "I'll take care of that." He paused. "Geneva, I'm not exactly gala material." "That's the point. To make me feel like a fish in a tuxedo. To make them realize not everyone who matters is wearing a Rolex." He exhaled slowly. "What do you want me to be exactly? A date or a statement?" "I want you to be you, and I want you next to me." He didn't answer right away. The idea of standing in a room full of billionaires and hedge fund heirs made his stomach twist. "I don't belong in your world," he said finally. "Maybe my world needs a little more of yours." In the end, he said yes. The next evening, a tailor arrived at his apartment with a garment bag and a nervous energy that reminded Yarden of a man delivering a bomb. The suit inside was deep charcoal with subtle pinstripes and fit like it had been made by someone who understood shoulders and stubborn pride. The shoes gleamed like mirrors. He didn't ask how much it cost. He didn't want to know. When the car pulled up, Lily waved from the neighbor's window, already in pajamas and halfway through her second bedtime story. He rode in silence, palms sweating, until the car dropped him in front of the Grand Palais Hotel, where the gala was already in full swing. Light spilled through towering windows, and a red carpet unfurled like a challenge. He stepped onto it and immediately regretted everything until he saw her. Geneva stood at the top of the steps, wearing a backless silver gown that fell like liquid around her. Her hair was swept to one side, revealing a single diamond earring that caught the light every time she moved. But what made him forget how to breathe wasn't the dress. It was the look she gave him when their eyes met, like he was the only person in the world who mattered right then. "You look," she began, "like it borrowed someone else's life." I was going to say devastating. He laughed once. "Let's hope don't trip and ruin it." Inside, the ballroom was a cathedral of excess crystal chandeliers, gold-trimmed columns, and tables dressed like royalty. Waiters glided between clusters of laughter and champagne flutes, and a live quartet played something elegant and forgettable. Geneva guided him through the crowd, every head turning as she passed. She introduced him as Yarden Preston without qualifiers. No mention of his job, his background, or his bank account, just his name, and somehow that was enough. At their table, a man with 2 white teeth leaned across his plate of foie gras. "Geneva, you've been hiding this one. Where did you two meet?" Yarden answered before she could. "At a concert, gave her my extra seat." The man blinked, clearly unsure whether it was a joke. Geneva smiled. "It was the best seat I've ever had." Later, they danced. Not because he wanted to, but because she asked. her hand in his, her body close, and the music soft enough that he could whisper without anyone hearing. "You really weren't kidding about this world, huh?" She looked up at him. "You still think you don't belong?" "I think I'm wearing a suit that costs more than my car." "And yet, you're still the most grounded person in this room." He wanted to believe her. But when he looked around at the women with designer gowns and the men who talked in numbers, it was hard not to feel like an imposter. After the final toast, when the crowd thinned and the music faded, Geneva slipped her hand into his and led him upstairs to one of the private terraces. The city spread out below them, lights, noise, 1,000 stories happening at once. "I used to come up here when I first took over the company," she said, "when the board made it clear they didn't think I could handle it." He leaned on the balcony beside her. "Let me guess, you proved them wrong." "I outlasted them." They stood in silence, the wind cool against their faces. "I've been in rooms like that my whole life," she said, "but tonight felt different." "Because couldn't tell the difference between caviar and cat food." "Because you weren't trying to impress anyone, you were just real." He turned to her. "You always this honest after champagne." "I'm always this honest with you." He kissed her then, this time slower, deeper, like he wasn't afraid of what might come next. And when she leaned into him, he knew she wasn't either. But as they pulled apart, the terrace door creaked open, and a woman stepped out, tall, angular, with sharp eyes and a colder smile. "Geneva," she said smoothly, "I didn't realize you were entertaining." Geneva stiffened. "Evelyn." The woman's gaze shifted to Yarden. "And you must be the concert ticket." Yarden offered a tight smile. "That's me." Evelyn faced Geneva again. "You know the board's already nervous about the Brazil acquisition. They won't like distractions." "This isn't a distraction." "It will be, unless you're careful." She disappeared back inside, leaving the door swinging gently behind her. Yarden looked at Geneva. "Want to tell me who that was?" "My CFO and my ex-fiancé." Yarden blinked. "That's unexpected." She met his eyes. "So is this, but I'm not walking away." Neither was he. "Not tonight." "Do you regret it?" Yarden asked, eyes fixed on the skyline as wind tugged lightly at his collar. Geneva leaned against the railing beside him, the city lights painting silver across her skin. "Regret what?" "Letting me in." She turned her head. "Is that what you think I did?" He took a breath, steadying the knot in his stomach. "I walked into your world like I was just borrowing space. Now your CFO, your ex, is warning you off me in front of half the city. I'm not exactly low profile anymore." Geneva didn't look away. "I don't need Evelyn's approval." "That doesn't mean it won't cost you." "I didn't build my company by worrying what other people thought of my choices." "You might not care what they think," he said, voice low, "but you care about what you've built, and I'm not here to make that harder." She stepped closer, her voice calm but unflinching. "You're not a burden, Yarden. You're a decision I made, one I stand by." He searched her face. "Even if it means putting your name on the line for someone like me." Geneva met his gaze without hesitation, especially because of that. He didn't respond, not because he doubted her, but because the weight of her certainty left him breathless. It was the kind of belief he hadn't felt from anyone in years. Not when he'd been scrambling to keep his daughter fed, not when he'd patched roofs in the rain just to make rent. Geneva's phone buzzed inside her clutch. She ignored it. He nodded toward it. "You should check that." She didn't move. "It can wait." He exhaled through a quiet laugh. "You're not exactly what I expected when I asked if the seat was taken." "I'm full of surprises," she said. "You haven't seen the half of it." They stood together until the terrace emptied and the city seemed to hush beneath them. When they returned inside, the ballroom had dimmed, the last of the guests filtering out. Geneva stopped at the coat check and picked up a small envelope. She handed it to Yarden. "What's this?" "Something I had arranged before you even agreed to come." He opened it and frowned. 2 sleek tickets stared up at him, first class to Barcelona. Departure, 3 weeks from now. "I don't get it." "I'm speaking at a summit there. It's only 2 days, but I thought maybe you and Lily could use a little sun. I booked a suite with an extra room. You wouldn't need to dress up or shake hands. Just come." He stared at the tickets. "This is a lot." "I didn't do it to impress you. I did it because I wanted you there." He looked up. "You keep doing this." "Doing what?" "Pulling the rug out from under me, but somehow I don't hit the floor." She smiled gently. "That's because I'm not trying to make you fall. I'm trying to see if you'll fly." The ride home was quiet, but not strained. A calm had settled between them, like neither needed to fill the space with anything else. When the car pulled up to his building, she reached out and touched his hand. "Will you think about it?" "I don't have to," he said. "Lily's been asking what Spain looks like ever since she saw it on a cartoon." She laughed, then leaned in. The kiss they shared this time wasn't a question, it was an answer. 3 weeks later, Lily clutched a tiny stuffed panda in one hand and a boarding pass in the other while Yarden tried to look like he belonged in the first-class lounge. Geneva sat across from them in jeans and a linen blouse, no makeup, her hair loose and windblown from the drive. "I feel like I should be wearing a tuxedo just to sit in these chairs," Yarden muttered. "Then you clearly haven't seen what passes for fashion on these flights," she said, nodding toward a man in silk pajamas and glittering loafers. Lily giggled. "Daddy, he looks like a disco turtle." Geneva laughed until she had to cover her mouth with a napkin. "Remind me to hire her as my next speechwriter." Once on the plane, Lily fell asleep halfway through takeoff, her head against Yarden's arm. Geneva rested her hand on his knee, a quiet comfort. He turned to her. "I still don't get it." "You get what?" "You could have had anyone. Someone who knows which fork to use at dinner, or how to pronounce aioli without sounding like he's choking on it. And yet, I picked the guy who showed up with drywall dust on his collar and gave me half his popcorn." He shook his head. "You're out of your mind." "Maybe, or maybe I finally found someone who reminds me that life isn't just about balance sheets and board votes." He looked at her, and something inside him settled. Not like a conclusion, but like the beginning of something he hadn't dared to believe in for a long time. Barcelona was warm and golden. Geneva delivered her speech in a hall filled with the powerful and influential, and Yarden watched from the back, Lily squeezing his hand every time Geneva's name drew applause. But it wasn't the summit that changed things. It was the night Geneva took them to a small market by the coast, where street musicians played and locals danced barefoot in the square. Lily twirled between them, her laughter rising like music of its own, and Geneva handed Yarden a folded piece of paper. He opened it, a drawing clearly Lily's of 3 stick figures holding hands under a sun. One had wild curls, one had tall heels, the last had a hammer. "She gave this to me earlier," Geneva said, "told me I had to keep it forever." He looked down at the paper, then at Geneva. "You're sure about this?" "I'm not afraid anymore," she said, "and don't want to be apart from either of you." He didn't say anything. He just reached for her hand, and she laced her fingers through his like they'd always belonged there. 6 months later, in a sun-drenched garden behind a small chapel in the hills near where Geneva's grandmother once lived, they said their vows. There were no investors or press releases, no board members or headlines. Just friends, family, and a little girl who dropped the flower petals too soon and then danced through them anyway. Yarden wore a blue suit, his own this time, and Geneva's dress was simple, elegant, and chosen without a single stylist. When they kissed, it wasn't about fanfare. It was about choosing each other, again and again, forever. Later that night, as they watched Lily fall asleep on a blanket under the stars, Geneva rested her head on Yarden's shoulder. "So," he said quietly, "still think I'm the best seat you ever had?" She smiled against his skin. "Definitely the only one that ever came with a daughter, drywall dust, and the rest of my life." And this time, Yarden didn't feel like an outsider in her world. Because now, they had a world of their own. The rain started just as Yarden stepped outside the bakery with Lily's cake box tucked under one arm. Fat, warm drops splashed onto the pavement, and despite the gray clouds, he smiled. It was her 7th birthday, and for the first time, they were celebrating it not just with balloons and presents, but with family. Not just him and Lily anymore. He jogged to the car, shielding the box with his jacket. The scent of vanilla and fresh butter wafted from the box as he placed it gently in the back seat next to a bundle of wrapped gifts. He could already hear Lily's voice echoing in his mind, asking if the frosting was purple like she asked. He knew it was he'd made sure himself. Back at the house, Geneva knelt on the floor of the living room surrounded by tissue paper and curling ribbon, trying to tame a cluster of helium balloons that refused to cooperate. Her hair was pulled into a messy knot, and she wore jeans and a soft green tee that had flour smudged on the side from baking cupcakes earlier. The polished CEO from the rooftop gala was long gone. She looked up as Yarden stepped in, rainwater beating on his shoulders. "Cake survived?" she asked, her fingers still wrestling with a knot in the ribbon. "Barely." He crossed the room, crouched beside her, and took over the task. "You know you can delegate this stuff now. You're married to a guy who once built an entire playhouse with one screwdriver and a roll of duct tape. You're assuming, trust you near balloons after what happened with the helium tank last time." He grinned. That was one time, and in fairness, did make Lily laugh so hard she snorted apple juice. Geneva reached for a roll of tape, pausing when she noticed the small velvet box still in his jacket pocket. Her brows lifted. "You didn't." "I did. But we agreed on no more surprises today." He opened the box slowly. Inside was a delicate gold bracelet, thin, elegant, with a tiny engraved charm shaped like a house. "It's for you," he said, "to remind you this is home, not the penthouse, not the boardroom, us." She didn't speak for a moment. Then she took the bracelet, fastening it with a quiet care that said more than words could. "You're getting good at this," she murmured. He pulled her close. "I've had some decent practice." The doorbell rang before she could reply, and Lily's voice echoed from upstairs. "I'll get it." Yarden stood as Lily thundered down the stairs, in a blur of sparkly tights and pigtails. "Careful with the," Geneva began, just as Lily flung the front door open, revealing a line of kids and parents holding bags, gifts, and one giant piñata shaped like a llama. "I told you she'd go overboard on the invites," Geneva whispered as she grabbed her clipboard with the schedule she'd meticulously organized. "I thought you said you wanted to keep it small." "I did." Then Lily made a seating chart and started assigning cupcake flavors by star sign. Yarden laughed. "She gets that from you." "No, she gets the chaos from you. The planning, that's all me." The party unfolded in a blur of laughter, music, and frosting. The backyard glittered with fairy lights, and Lily led a parade of kids through obstacle courses Yarden had built from old lumber and pool noodles. Geneva bounced between guests, refilling drinks and answering enthusiastic questions from curious neighbors who were still getting used to the fact that the Geneva Zanders now lived in a quiet suburb where kids rode bikes past her front lawn. As the sun dipped low, Yarden found Geneva standing near the hedge. watching Lily open a pile of presents with the intensity of a queen surveying her kingdom. "She's happy," Geneva said, her voice soft. "Because you made this perfect." "Because we did." He slid an arm around her waist. "You know, I've been thinking." "Dangerous." "I want to quit the site." She turned to face him fully. "You mean completely?" "I've been offered a project manager role with a small firm. It's local, stable hours, better pay. I'd be overseeing design builds instead of hauling beams 12 hours a day." Her eyes searched his. "And you didn't mention this earlier because?" "Because I wanted to be sure I wasn't doing it just to fit into your world." She shook her head. "You don't have to fit into anything, but if this is what you want." "I want to be around more, not stumbling in at 9 p.m., too exhausted to eat. I want to help Lily with her science fair volcano and make you breakfast before your calls." "Then do it," she said simply. "We'll figure everything else out." Later that night, after the guests had gone and Lily was fast asleep with cupcake crumbs on her pillow, Geneva stood barefoot in the kitchen, sipping tea as Yarden cleaned up the last of the paper plates. "I told Evelyn I was stepping back," she said. He paused, glancing over. "From the company?" "Just a little. I'm still CEO, but I'm restructuring, delegating more. I've been holding on so tightly for so long, I didn't realize it was okay to let go of the wheel sometimes." "Because you trust the team." "Because I trust you, us, this life." He crossed to her, took the cup from her hand, and set it on the counter. "What are you doing?" she asked, smiling. "Finishing this night right." He lifted her onto the counter, her legs wrapping around his waist as he kissed her slowly, without rush. There was no more pretending, no more waiting. Just the two of them in the quiet glow of their kitchen, the scent of sugar and rain hanging in the air. "I love you," she whispered. "I know," he said, "and I love you right back." The next morning, Lily burst into their room before dawn, dragging her blanket and announcing loudly that she had decided to become a magician. Geneva groaned into her pillow while Yarden pulled her close, still half asleep but grinning. 2 years later, Geneva opened a new wing of her foundation's headquarters, dedicated to scholarships for single parents pursuing trades. Yarden stood beside her during the ribbon cutting, his name engraved on the donor plaque just beneath hers. Lily wore a pink blazer and gave a speech about how her dad made the best grilled cheese in the world, and how her stepmom taught her that smart girls can also be the boss. In the crowd, reporters whispered about the power couple who turned a chance concert meeting into a love story no one could have written. But Yarden didn't care about what they said. He only cared that Geneva was holding his hand, Lily was dancing to the jazz band near the fountain, and the life they'd built, the messy, beautiful, unexpected life, was real. Not borrowed. Not temporary. Theirs. Forever.